Hi everyone. Today I wanted to talk about feeling powerless, what to do about it, and why it comes into your life. So many of us feel that we are in a situation where we have no choice, where we can't do things, where we're very limited, and the power is in the hands of that other human being out there. It's in the hands of reality, of the universe, of God, of the partner, or whatever it is. And we live that way and we think that's normal. We think that's natural. It definitely has been normalized. And so for many of us, we stay stuck there and we suffer. Because maybe a part of us is enduring it, but there is another part of us that is so resentful, that is so angry, that is so rebellious. And there is this war happening inside. And then there is this part that is saying, why is this happening to me? I mean, how can this be? This is not fair. And yet, then the other part will come, no, we have to endure this. This is the way it is. Suck it up, And so this happens inside of us, and most of the time we don't talk about it because we think it's normal, because we think we're the only ones having that issue. And it's not true. The feeling of powerlessness is just everywhere. And it's really showing up in different ways. And one of the biggest ways, and I'll talk about this in another audio, is the phenomenon of road rage, the pissed off driver, right? So this is how it shows up, and that's why I'm talking about it. But for today, I will go directly into powerlessness, and then in my other audio, I will talk about anger and road rage and all that. So what to do about it, right? What to do about it? Why is it there? And is it possible to come out of it? Is it possible that you don't have to live in that? You don't have to dwell in that you can actually, that it's just maybe a bridge. And so let me tell you a story, something that happened to me, and through that story, I'll answer all these questions. So I remember some time ago, I had this pattern that would come up, and it came up for a very long time. And the pattern was this. I would find myself in a car as a passenger with a very angry driver. And I would feel like a victim there. As if I had no choice. For me in that moment, I had no choice. I was like a shackled up prisoner that was just sentenced to go into that car and endure the rage of that driver. And for me, I really had no choice. And I want you to hear this, because in that moment, we really feel like we have no choice. And we need to acknowledge that. We really don't see other options. And I did not see those options. I was just, okay, this is happening again. And like a prisoner, I would go, like a captive. I would go into that car, and then I would endure the rage of the driver. And the driver wasn't enraged against me. The driver was enraged against all the other drivers. But even if the person is enraged and angry against all those other drivers, that person emits all that energy. It's a suppressed anger that is coming up, and it's imbuing the whole car. And I'm in that car. I'm stuck. I'm a captive in that car, and I can't come out of it. I mean, if I come out of it, I'll die, right? Because the car is moving. It's a box. I am captive of that box, right? And in that moment, what I would feel is I would feel unsafe. I would feel fear. And most of the time, I wouldn't be even aware of the fear, because what I would be aware of would be all those states, thoughts, and beliefs thoughts that would come up. The anger, rebellion would come up, because those states were trying to take me out of that feeling of powerlessness and utter fear. And those states where, I would start judging harshly the driver. There would be this cold anger in me against the driver. I would be in my mind very mean towards him, because I was too scared to react. I was too scared to show the feelings of anger that I had in that moment. And all these thoughts, that rebellious part would come up, and it just wanted revenge, wanted to go against him. And at the same time, a part of me would keep it down, because, another part of me would come up and say, I have to endure this. Because if I start engaging in that anger, then it's going to, this is going to end up in bad consequences, I was afraid that the fear would overwhelm me, and I was afraid that it would get worse, and I would get humiliated, and there's a lot of things that would come up. And most of the time when I was in that car, I would just be aware of the anger, the judgment, and everything. I wouldn't be aware of the fear, because the anger, the judgment, they're actually states that cover up the real feeling, the vulnerability, the real state I was in. They were the superficial parts. And usually we get stuck in those superficial parts, and that's why we don't heal. And the real truth was that I was in real and utter fear in that moment. And of course, if you think about it, the rational part of me, whenever I would realize that I was in fear, the rational part would be like, oh my God, you're being weak. You shouldn't be feeling fear. You can come out. You can tell the driver to stop the car and come out, right? There were so many things I could have done, and yet I did not do. And how many times have you seen that in other people? Not in yourself, but in other people, where you're like, why the hell are they going back to that same situation when they have so many other options? You know why? Because in that moment, you don't see those options. Because in that moment, that fear, it literally blinds you to everything. And the only option you see is like, I need to survive here. I need to do something so that I can survive it. And you're not seeing reality as it is, but you're seeing from such a limited perspective. And why do you see it from that limited perspective? It's because in that moment, because every moment, every relationship there's nothing random about the moment and the relationship. There's something always there that is shown to you. And in that moment, what was happening to me and what I see happening to other people is that it's not the adult me that is reacting, but it's my inner child. It's the child in me. In that moment, what is happening is that that situation is taking me back to those moments in my childhood where I felt so powerless. And I was a child, right? So I didn't have so many things. I didn't have the intellect to find the necessary, the intellectual capacity to find the necessary solutions. I didn't have so many things at hand, which I do have now. But at that point, I didn't. And so, because I couldn't find a solution, I resorted to a certain strategy, which was to endure, which was to, whatever it is, the strategy that you resort to. In my case, it was to act as if nothing was happening. It was to repress everything in me. It was to be nice and, find my power, my empowerment in the judgment. When I was judging, I felt a little bit of control. When I was judging that driver, I felt better than the driver. And it was a way to endure or to make me feel more empowered in that moment, right? Because I was small. And so now, that part of me that got stuck in that moment, that couldn't resolve that issue, that couldn't go through the fear and everything that was happening, because it was just not possible for the child to do that. It didn't have the capacity. All those parts that weren't healed were coming up in that moment in that car. So I was seeing, it's almost like, it's not almost like, it is that I was possessed by that child. I was possessed by that child, and the child was coming out, and it was acting the way it acted when it was small, when I was small, right? Because that part is still small according to it. And so what I'm trying to say here, those moments where you feel so powerless, it's not moments that are showing you your powerlessness. They're showing you the powerlessness your child went through. They're showing you how painful that was for the child. They're showing you how that child didn't know what to do. And they're showing you how that child resorted to a certain coping mechanism. And it's in that moment that you can do the same behavior. And so go into the child, be the child, and act as a child in that pattern, in that situation. Or it's a moment where you can actually sit down with your child and let it go through all the healing that it needs. And healing for me means to integrate the fact that, that child was in so much pain because it had no choice. The fact that there was so much fear that it couldn't integrate because it didn't know how to integrate. And it's like, for me, it's like sitting down with your child and mirroring back to it its feelings, its thoughts, so that it can become aware of them, and integrate them and develop itself and go from child to adult. And this is, another word for this is also trauma. And I remember Dr. Gabor Mate saying that trauma is a scarification, and it's a part that is, a scar doesn't move, it's stuck. right? It's very stiff. And that's what happens when you let the scar remain a scar. And that's why you're going to act the same way over and over again. And then you have the choice to do something about it, and that's where you start moving it. You sit with it and you let it move, you let it express itself completely. And then that energy from a scarred, rigid part liberates itself. And then that energy can be used to become empowered. And so, let me go back to the story. So, I remember this pattern came up over and over again, and there was this moment where it became it was happening regularly. And it became, I became so frustrated by it that I told myself, I need to do something about this, because I am not going through this again. I am just too tired, because it just felt preposterous that this thing is happening over and over again, and I'm just tired of it. I'm exhausted, right? So what I did was, I knew that day I had to, in that moment for me, I had to, right? Go into that car, and again, the same situation would happen, and he would be angry against, again, other drivers. It wasn't even about me, but still, that triggered so much fear in me, right? And so before I went into that car, I realized that I was already feeling a lot of discomfort, and I wasn't being aware of it. And that anger helped me become aware of it. And I started realizing that I was feeling fear. It was pure fear that I was feeling. And so I was preparing myself to endure it. I was preparing to numb it out, in different ways. I was preparing to become whatever. I was preparing to do that. So by preparing to do that, to numb it out, I was actually not feeling into it, right? So I was repressing it. And instead of doing that, I went completely into it. I went completely into the fear. I started telling myself, I started talking to my inner child, saying things like, I'm so sorry you're so scared. I'm so sorry you're so panicked. I'm so sorry you're judging yourself so harshly for feeling fear. I'm so sorry you're not letting yourself feel fear. I'm so sorry that feeling fear makes you look so weak. I'm so sorry you're fighting against yourself. I'm so sorry you're battling your own nature. I'm so sorry you're so confused. I'm so sorry you just don't know what to do. I'm so sorry this is so terrifying. I'm so sorry you've been in this hellhole for so long. I'm so sorry you've been in this hellhole all alone. I'm so sorry there was no one there for you. I'm so sorry no one was there for you So you weren't there for yourself either. I'm so sorry this is taking so long. I'm so sorry you're so exhausted of that constant battle happening inside of you. I'm so sorry you just can't be you. And so I would go on talking with the little one and just letting that little one feel that fear. I would feel that fear in my chest. And I would just be like, okay, there is fear. I'm here with you, right? And I'll be here with you for as long as you need me to. There's no deadlines for that fear. If I need to feel fear for the rest of my life, I will. Because I'm tired. I'm exhausted of shoving it away, shoving it down. Because it's still there. It's still in me. It's, toxifying in me. Because it's not going anywhere. And so I really stayed there, and I was completely with it. This is called unconditional presence and unconditional love, meaning that I'm not going to be there with me because I succeeded, but I'm going to be with me even when I fail, even when I feel weak, even when I feel fear. I am going to be with me, whatever comes up. And it's just amazing how it's those ugly parts that actually teach you unconditional love, unconditional presence. So I did that. And then suddenly I felt relief. And the relief happened because instead of fighting myself, I went completely into myself and I became one with myself. I became one with the fear. And that's what integration is, actually. You become one. You're not fighting it. You're not separating yourself from it. And as I did that, at some point, I had to leave. I had to go into the car. And again, in that moment, I knew I had a choice. I couldn't. But in that moment, there was a part of me that came up and it was like, I have a feeling I haven't finished the integration. And there was a curiosity that came up because now I know I can survive it. Now I can feel the power in me because I'm going from powerlessness, from I have no choice, to I have a choice, to what is this showing me? And so I went into the car and at some point he started getting angry and I started feeling again that fear. And it was easy for me in that moment because I wasn't covering it up. I was like, I'm going to be here with you. And then I realized what that fear was about, what that fear was showing me. I wasn't in the child anymore. That had been integrated. Now I was looking at the situation from the perspective of an adult. And so I was seeing, I wanted to know what was happening, wanted to know the conundrum so I could find the solution, right? So in that moment, because powerlessness is about, it's when you tell yourself, I can't, I have no choice, I have no say in it. So what was it that I couldn't do in that moment? I asked myself that. And what came up very clearly was that in that moment, I felt that I couldn't find a space, a place, a relationship where I could feel safe. So it was, I can't find safety in relationships. I can't find safety anywhere. And so that was the I can't, the powerlessness. So if that's the I can't, the powerlessness, what's automatically when you realize what the problem is from that state, right away you have a solution. It's just as simple as that. Because if there is an up, if there is, high, there's always low. There's no high without the low. It's thanks to the low that you know the high. If there's up, there's down, right? It always goes together. One is linked with the other. One does not exist without the other. So the problem cannot exist without the solution. And because in that moment I had healed the child in me, now I'm seeing there's no fog. There's no confusion there. I'm seeing reality as it is, and the options are always there. And so what came up is I can't find a place where I feel safe. And the empowerment was, okay, so let me create it. Let me create places where I can feel, I can be safe. Let me start finding people with whom I can feel safe. Let me start doing something about it. And when I felt that I felt so good. And then this idea came to post about anger, to post about emotions and responsibility. Because what was happening in that moment for me very clearly is that he was angry. That was not the issue. Being angry is not the issue. The issue was that he wasn't aware of his anger. He wasn't taking responsibility for his anger, and he was just throwing it all over the place and saying that it's, the other driver's fault. And he wasn't taking responsibility for the energy that he was exuding in that moment. If someone comes to you and is angry, and they're responsible and they're aware of their anger, it's a completely different experience than somebody that is not aware of their anger, and they're taking that energy and they're shoving it onto you. It does not feel good. You'll feel attacked. You will want to get away from there, and it will not feel safe to be with that person. So it's about taking utter responsibility for the states that you're in. And so I was like, okay, so I want to create things like that. And, and automatically ideas popped into my mind, like, posting a post on anger, talking with people about anger, finding people who want to work on anger, and things like that. And that's what empowerment is about. It's when the powerlessness becomes a stepping stone that tells you where you're losing power, where your power or your energy is restricted and limited. And based on that information, because that is data, right? Based on that information, you start creating something that you want for yourself, that you want for the people around you. And your energy goes towards it. And you're motivated now because you don't want powerlessness. And so you use it as a bridge to go into empowerment. And that just becomes something incredible, where nothing is wasted. Everything in your life becomes a tool, an information for you to go towards what you want, to create what you want. So let me stop it here. I hope yeah, I'd love to know about you, about your state of powerlessness. How do you deal with that? And if you have any questions or any comments, let me know down below.